Hi, and welcome to the next episode in this series of videos about this new book, The Potent Power of Menopause. And today I am joined by the man in our collective. Now, this is Neil, and yes, we are sat together. And for those who've got eagle eyes, you will notice that we share the same surname, and indeed we are married. So we are here as husband and wife. So we're going to hear the men's perspective on menopause, which is fantastic because it's something that we rarely hear. What it's like to be the male part of a relationship, or to be a man interacting with menopausal women, whether that be as a colleague, a manager, a friend, a family member. So it's a real opportunity to hear that side of the story. So welcome, Neil.
Thank you. Delighted to be here. Delighted to be involved.
There's a lot in this chapter, but let's take 3 key points. So the first one we're going to talk today about is men are essentially involved, whether they like it or not. This is something women can't keep to themselves. So men are involved, Neil.
Absolutely. As I've been involved. Men are involved, whether it's work, social, whether it's family. If you think about all of the women that men will interact with in the course of these activities and these sort of aspects of their life, particularly as the menopause can last from sort of 4 to 8 years, we think about all of those overlapping menopauses going on amongst all of those women around us. We are inevitably involved. This is not something that we can choose to ignore, choose to walk away from, pretend is not happening. It's absolutely a part of men's lives, just as it's a part of women's lives.
Absolutely, it is. And we're in our 8th year of my menopause. So we've been going through this for a while. But so it's not just a woman's issue, as it's so frequently called. This is a family issue and a societal issue, isn't it? And a sort of a work issue as well.
Absolutely. Until we started understanding your menopause and what you were going through, I had no idea that in a work environment I'd been interacting with and working with women who were probably going through their menopause. I had no understanding of that. I didn't know anything about the menopause at all. You started to make me aware of it as you approached it, in terms of looking for those early signs and signals that it was coming. But really, I, along with probably most men, had no idea of what was about to happen, what was likely to happen, what the symptoms would be, how long it would last, what the impact will be. And I think where we do start to sort of step into that space, we see it in terms of some of the big hero symptoms, but we don't really understand or appreciate that they are just as likely to be sort of more hidden, more emotional symptoms, not just the physical ones that we might see, like hot flushes. That's the sort of the instant male response usually to the menopause, but there is so much else going on that we need to understand.
Yeah, and I mean, in our experience, I had lots of the sort of emotional and psychological symptoms going on as well. And actually talking about that and getting that out in the open was a big thing, wasn't it? It was about conversing and saying, this is going on for me, and it's really tough. But you wouldn't have known some of that unless I'd actually started to talk about it.
Absolutely. It was a crash course in menopause, really. Because we had to, because things were happening that we couldn't explain. We couldn't explain them by other means, those sorts of things that we might be a little more familiar with going on in our lives. So, lost for a reason or an attribute for what was happening, it forced us to explore the menopause, what it was about, what it meant for you, and potentially then how I could get involved and how I could help. But it really all started with that awareness, without understanding what the menopause is, what it's about, how those symptoms display themselves, and the impact not just of the individual symptoms, but of the symptoms on one another as well.
Yeah.
The complexity of the subject was something that I think, as I first started to become aware of it, I was really quite shocked at. And it's taken me quite a few years during this process with yourself to really understand what it's all about.
Yeah, and I think that's a really, really important point that is rarely talked about, is the fact of the sort of impacts of multiple symptoms on each other. And I often talk about the fact that you have a severe symptom at the centre, and then they're all attracted to it, like iron filings to a magnet, and that they impact on each other and build this greater experience.
That was just as I say, it was a sort of voyage of discovery. And as much as we can write about it, and that's what I've attempted to do with this chapter in the book, to try and create a starting point really for a lot of men. If you're going to pick up one article, one essay, something to really sort of begin the process of discovery and that process of awareness. We can talk about it as much as possible, but it does involve an in-depth understanding and really understanding from the experience of those women around you who are going through it, talking to them, just talking about their experience and helping to build that picture in as rich a way as possible.
Which brings us beautifully to the second point, which is men saying they want to help.
Yeah, it's quite frequent that sort of men I interacted with and those people that sort of wherever menopause cropped up in discussion, and it was inevitably going to do that because of Kate's experience and her work. I frequently found men saying that their wives or partners were going through the menopause and what could they do and how could they help. But the conversation seemed to end there. It was just a case of we want to help, but anyone fancy another pint? It was really just the case really that there's what emerged was there's a really big gap between expressing an interest in helping and actually helping. And when we think about helping, it's not just a case of look, if I do the drying up, is that really going to put the dishes away? Is that really going to help? It's not a case of a chore. It's not a case of a particular task. This is about building that awareness, having the openness to be able to talk about it on an ongoing basis, understanding that this is a long-term experience. It's not something like a common cold or flu or something that will come and go. This is something that is going to be with us for a number of years, and it's going to change during the process of those years as well. And that's something that really I had no idea about when you began in menopause, was just what a sort of journey it would go on in terms of symptoms coming and going, interacting with one another. But there is still, I think, this really big gap between intent to help and actually doing something about it that really has to start to be bridged.
Yeah, that kind of, instead of it just being conversation, it being action, it being something that is implementable, something that you are doing on a day-to-day basis, that you're not just an observer on the outside, you are absolutely in this together.
It's not just activities, it's not a tick list, it's not things you can do. Whilst there are things you can do in the sort of broader scheme of it all, it's a mindset change. It's actually opening your mind to what is actually going on, understanding sort of the emotional experience of your partner, and being prepared to move with it and to understand it as it changes as well. And some of those activities that we will need to be prepared for, will need to be responsive to, they'll change over time as well. This isn't something where we can just, implement the plan, draw up a list of things to do, keep doing them, and then one day maybe it'll all be over and we can stop doing them, and then we can move on and get on with the rest of our lives. This is an entirely different proposition, probably from a man's point of view, from anything we've really encountered in our lives to this date. Whilst it's an incredibly difficult and new experience for women, it is for men too. And their ability to work with their partners, to cope with what's happening and to help is a different sort of approach than most of the approaches men will take when they're dealing with a situation that's in front of them.
The women need that. They need to know that their partner is there beside them, that they are taking this journey with them in whatever direction it might be, that they are doing this together. And I know that I valued it enormously, that I knew that you were beside me and prepared to step in if I needed it.
And talking about it was absolutely critical. And we've talked about the menopause a lot. We've talked about it in terms of just
a lot.
just things that may have occurred, responses that were needed. We've talked about it in more sort of general terms in terms of where we think we're at with it, where we think it's going, what we think is changing. But being prepared to talk about something from a man's point of view, being prepared to talk about something that's not happening to us. It's not about us. It's about both of us. is an incredibly important part of this, and to be entirely selfless in all of this, really, because it's vital that we, that there's no subject off the table, and sometimes that involves talking about intimate things as well as just sort of mundane day-to-day things as well.
Yeah.
Broaching subjects that men actually often find difficult to talk about, even without a menopause, just find difficult to talk about per se. Suddenly we're having to talk about these things, and we're then finding ourselves wanting to talk about these things in conditions of much higher pressure, with much more at stake at that time. So as I said earlier, it is a mindset shift. I think it's an emotional shift as well for me.
That's very true, and I think that the shift that's needed it's continuous, isn't it? It's not like well, we're just going to make this change today and then we're going to be static here. Yep. And then we'll just work around this issue. It changes again tomorrow, and then the next day, and then the next day. Well, maybe not every day, but it changes continuously. Yeah. It's an ever-evolving situation.
And there are times where we think this is just really damn difficult and I just don't know what to do. And there will be times where I did many times, get it hopelessly wrong. Think we understood the situation, think we knew what was required, and just got it totally wrong, and had to learn from that. And I think, as long as there is an openness and an ability then to be able to sort of talk about it afterwards in terms of, well, what could I have done differently? What should I have done differently? And then try to do that differently next time. But next time might be an entirely different situation again. So we might get it wrong several times in a very short space of time. But that's part of working it through together. What sort of happens really is there's sort of no right and wrong in the end when we start to unpack this. There's just different ways of looking at it, different ways of responding, different ways of dealing with the situation we find ourselves in. When it comes down to it, saying it's too difficult and we don't want to deal with this, that's just really not good enough. We have to be able to be adaptive, to respond, to be considerate, to be aware of what's going on around us all the time, and to be open to talking about absolutely anything that is going on between us, to be able to sort of resolve this and move on. It's because we never quite know what we're going to face next. The next challenge is probably something that we haven't seen before. Yeah. Because of the nature of the way the symptoms change over that time and the change in terms of their relation to one another, just because we think we've sort of cracked it, well, there's a little bit of a surprise in store probably next time round. It's not quite going to be the way it was last time. It's a very different mindset that a man needs in helping their partner through this than one they've ever really used or deployed when they've been dealing with a problem in their life before, or a situation they've confronted in their life before, where it's almost like, we analyse the problem, we draw up a list of things we have to do, we do them. We measure their success, we sort of slightly tweak the things that weren't working, and we think when we've got to the end of it that we've solved it. Well, the menopausal experience is absolutely nothing like that. It's a whole different mindset and approach that's needed.
That's point number 3, by the way. Saying it's too hard is not good enough, and all of that trying to create a practical plan of how to deal with this, where to go, what to do next. When we get to B, then we'll go to C, then we might miss D and go to E. It's not that linear, it's not that obvious, and it's not that simple, really.
Well, like with all change events that we encounter in our lives, whether it's in our personal lives or in our working lives, it's much more about being prepared than it is having a plan.
Yeah.
A plan is something that should be quite soft and quite easy to change. It's about our state of preparation in all of this. And that begins with awareness. It's achieved through being open and being able to talk about it. It's being able to be able to respond sensitively, quickly, where we need to respond in different ways, depending on what's going on around us. But at all times, it's about doing this together. This is not 2 individual situations here. The woman suffering from the menopause, the man responding. This is one situation entirely that has to be handled together.
Yeah. And on that note, I think that's a great place to leave it. Thank you very much, Neil.
Thank you.
Please subscribe. The book's now on release. It's available on all book outlets globally. It's really great to have you here. Thank you again, Neil, and I will see you soon.
Thank you.